All right, welcome to Talk-Jitsu with host Uki Mike, Joey Boretski, and me, Jordan Preisinger from Jordan Teaches Jiujitsu. Today we have a great episode for you guys, and it's going to be about jiu-jitsu triggers. So what a trigger is you see something and then you go for it. And I use a lot of triggers when I grapple. Like it just makes things easier. So instead of imposing your will always and trying to force things that you want, you take what's available. And more often than not, that's the path of least resistance. So we'll start off with one of my, just a really easy one. It's just like the open elbow. It's like the super obvious one, an easy one to get into. So if you're on the bottom or even on the top, but especially on the bottom in guard, you see someone's open elbow and you can grab their wrist, loop your arm through, you can take a Kimura. So if someone's keeping their elbow open, that's the perfect time to go for a Kimura. And just the open elbow in general is a great time to go for underhooks as well. And I made a video, what was it called? It was, oh my God, I can't remember what it's called. Oh yeah, it was like 10 jiu-jitsu tips or guard passing tips. And that was one of the tips, like see the open elbow. And one of the clips, I was in my guard and the guy had both his elbows open. So it was like, what do I want? Do I want an underhook or do I want a Kimura? I started off going for the Kimura, but I'm like, I'll take the underhook. And those kind of things, you can't just let those things happen. Like, triggers are good to understand to attack, but also good to understand to prevent, because you can't give your partner any triggers. So
what about, like, I've seen you roll and give somebody a trigger? You know, You're setting somebody up for failure. You know what I mean? You got to watch for that too.
Yeah, I do that a lot too, where I'll set traps, where I'll give someone something, because if you know exactly what they need, you can give them like almost like a little bite, like a little, it's a little bit of it, and then you just don't give them the rest of it, and then they go for it, and you're ready for it, and then you trap them. So yeah, I do that a lot, like give people underhooks and whatnot, because I want to go for a guillotine or something. I do that
all the time just from watching your videos. Yeah,
exactly. And so the open elbows are a really easy one to start with, but not super. I don't know, there's not a lot to be said other than, okay, another good example would be an arm triangle. So you're in mounts and you see the open elbow, the perfect time to get an underhook and start working an arm triangle. And it doesn't have to be an arm triangle. You can jack up the arm the same way you would for an arm triangle. Take an arm bar or something like that. Like there's, especially in Nogi, there's not really a lot of ways of getting up high on people other than jacking up their arms using an underhook. So yeah, and actually this is a good example too. I was teaching class, I was teaching like how to escape mounts, and I was saying you need to keep your elbows super tight. And then I was doing the sequence where I did the whole sequence, and I was using Mike as a uki. And then I was like, well, now let's get Mike to continue the sequence, because it ended up like it started off with me and mounts. I escaped and did the dogfight, got to mount on him, and then he can do the sequence on me. I was like, well, let's put Mike on the spot. Let's see if he does it perfect. And the first thing he does is as he's escaping, opens his elbow. I'm like, oh, now I got an underhook. So yeah, like putting people on the spot can be a good thing, even though like I don't want to like, make you feel bad or anything.
It's all good. I go completely blank when there's people around, and as soon as you did it, I did it again. I opened my elbow again immediately. But after that, I swear to God, I kept that sucker glued to my side as much as I possibly could. So I learned my lesson. It's a good way for me to learn a lesson, is to not like being embarrassed in front of people, but to be put on the spot in front of people for sure.
Yeah, almost like being exposed. Yeah. Like you, probably a great learning like opportunity for you, because now, you don't want to make that mistake again. Probably really resonated in your head.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge proponent of shaming. I know people, you can't do that in this day and age, but I mean, if I'm not looking right and you say, Mike, you're looking fat, that motivates me. Darren told me I looked skinny once, and I went to the gym and put on 15 pounds. Like I need that shit in my life. So yeah, shame me as much as you can.
And Darren's so honest too. He'll just like say what he thinks. Like, Darren, God damn it.
Yeah, honest to like almost an autistic degree.
Yeah. He's probably got a little bit of autism for sure. People say I do too.
People say I do as well.
Yeah, so I can say that.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, being the uki's hard. Like Nikki was the uki last night, and she was having a hard time, like, because it's just like so much in your head. But
yeah, because you don't want to fuck up in front of everybody, and the pressure's there, and you're training with the master of the class, right? So it's a lot.
Yeah, and if you can do things right when that pressure's on, then when you're actually rolling, then you're going to do it right. It's going to be easier to do it right. So it's like really good way to ingrain it in people's head, so, like without going overboard and like really shaming them where they feel like awful. But
yeah, you didn't make me feel like shit when I fucked up. You're just like, well, no, you didn't do it right. Let's do it again. Oh, you didn't do it right. It's just it made me do it right afterwards. Let's just put it that way.
Exactly. Yeah, I treat my students right because I don't want to go on a rant and I don't want to talk about negative comments. But one comment pissed me. Well, it didn't piss me off because it was just a reflection of him. But on the self-defense, that reality show I did, there was a trailer, and
I saw the trailer.
Yeah,
nice.
Someone wrote they're just hoping for me to lose. They're rooting against me because I seem like a really bad guy. I'm like, oh, that's not very nice. And so I asked him, like, what have I ever done for you to think that? And he's like, oh, it seems like you teabag your students. Like, and I think what he meant by that is like style on them, make them look bad, and for my own gain. But he's like, but I do learn from your channel. But it's like, okay, if I didn't roll with my students, I wouldn't have a channel for you to watch and learn from. So like, I was like, that's a crazy comment. And then he also said I seem really cocky. I was thinking, crap, does he watch the podcast? Because I think that's where my, like, I don't know, cockiness comes out the most. But I'm not cocky. I'm just confident.
I've never seen you stunt on your students anything more than I've seen you roll any black belt that's come into the gym to challenge you, or even that roll with Chewy when you mat returned him. Like, if you did that to me when on camera, would that be stunting? But just, you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I'm just rolling. I'm not doing anything different than I would like when I'm actually rolling, other than like sometimes I roll lazy or like whatever. But like, I'm just doing my best. It's the same thing I do when I'm actually rolling. So I viewed that as a reflection on him because probably he doesn't resonate well with people that are confident and just doesn't like them, views them as cocky. And he probably also has an ego where he wouldn't want to be filmed getting tapped repeatedly and put on the internet, which is, if you don't want that, that's fine. But he's projecting his like insecurities. And that's why he doesn't like me. But I explained it to him and he's like, oh, okay, you cleared it up. And now I don't dislike you pretty much. So yeah, that was good. But yeah, it didn't make me feel bad. I was just like, what the hell? But yeah, back to the topic of the podcast.
We should have a comment section every week. Just a little bit every week. Throw that in there.
There's always a comment I could talk about.
Yeah, the comment of the week.
But at least I don't cry about it like I used to on the podcast, and make it my therapy session like some have said. But yeah, Joey, when it comes to triggers, because I might have different triggers in mind than you do, so I'm really curious to hear your perspective. What kind of triggers you look for when you're grappling? Which ones you capitalize on?
So I do think you saying like the open elbows is like a huge one. Like we play a game in our gym where we do it from side control or mount, doesn't matter to me, where the bottom player, we do like a 3-minute round, their job is just to keep their elbows tight. So like elbows tight to their body. If you're in mount, maybe my hands are down on their hips, keeping them in low mount. If I'm in side control, I'm trying to keep my frames in front. And the top guy's job is literally just to try to open the elbows and like jack up the arms, isolate the arms. So like you said, from mount, get the arm above the head for like an arm triangle position. Every time we play it, for some reason, both the people on top and bottom are like, this game's really hard. I'm like, how? It can't be hard for both of you. Like, it has to be easier for one of you guys. But I notice now, like, when we roll, like, my students do not let their elbows leave their body because we play that game all the time. And they're like, no, I am clamping in tight. I'm not letting my elbows get exposed. So it's really frustrating for me because that's one of my triggers to go for a lot of these attacks. And they won't cooperate with me anymore. But another one I use a lot, like, sticking with like a top position, is when I'm in side control, is my opponent to bridge. I really like, I'm not the greatest guard passer in the world. I'm more of a guard player, but I do like playing on the top. So when I get past someone's guard, I don't ever want to get put back in a guard. And being a smaller guy, especially rolling with a lot of bigger people, they'll try and like just like do that like reversal thing almost where they like bridge you over. So for me, when I go to take mount is usually when someone bridges. The reason being, if your feet are both on the mat to bridge, you really can't move. Like your feet are committed to the mat. You've lifted your hips. How are you supposed to shrimp? How are you supposed to like reverse me, trap my ankle as I try and step over? So for me, that's like, and when I teach as a really big trigger. Like if I get side control, I'm going to put pressure, I'm going to hold. And the moment I feel the person start to bridge, I'm just going to step over into mount. And there's nothing they can really do to stop it. So it makes for like a really easy mount. No worries. Don't have to worry about getting my ankle trapped, and I don't have to worry about getting like reversed with the big bridge because I'm stepping forward as they bridge into me.
Yeah, that's a great example. And just in general, it's just a lot easier progressing when people are transitioning, because that's when they don't have their grips available to defend. So whatever it is that they're transitioning, they need to change their grips. And this would be not necessarily a transition, but in a way it is, because they're going from just being kind of defensive to actually trying to escape. And then, yeah, their grips of their legs can't grab your leg as easily because they're occupied on the ground. So like, that's a big thing, because people, they often just want to like impose their will and just go forward the whole time and not really, take their time and wait for things to come. And that's a hard style to have, because if you're really strong, then that's easier. But otherwise, like, attacking during the transitions is like definitely the way to go. And yeah, that's like, yeah, the same thing if like I'm passing half guard and I do like where I turn my hips and they try to bridge into me. I love that, because it's the same thing. It's like, you're just giving me mount. And because I've taught that before, and people are like, what do they bridge into you? It's like, well, I'm going to show that next anyways, but like, it doesn't matter. It's a good thing. So yeah, like that's a great example. And when it comes to the open elbow, not to be all over the place, but I think it's a good example of how important it is to be defensively sound. And I've been like kind of thinking about this, like more ways to explain inside position and how important it is. It's like you need to have like a defensive barrier, almost like a defensive shell that you can't let people penetrate. And if you let people, and which is your, to me, everything below your elbows, well, in front of your elbows and in front of your knees. And if you let people inside that space, well, you don't have your defensive barrier. Like, your shell is your forearms and your shins when it comes to frames. There's also closing space and staying tight, but it's the same thing. Underneath the elbows, that's when things go wrong. But yeah, people need to be way more aware of, like, they have a defensive shell that they can't let people penetrate. And it's from everywhere, from turtle, from guard, from guard passing. And a good example too, to tie it into another trigger, would be like when someone is passing and they step close to your head, it's the perfect time to go for X guard, because now you can grab over top their knee, which would be their thigh, and get underneath them. So now you're within their defensive shell, because their shins would be their shell, and which is another reason why you can't let them turn their knee towards you, because they could start putting their shin on you and framing on you. But if you control their knee, which you should in X guard, well, then they can't do that. So you can't have that defensive barrier, that shell in there. And yeah, you get your legs in there for X guard, and X guard is such a powerful guard. And basically people can make the mistake of stepping too close to your head and you go for X guard, or maybe you go for like a butterfly sweep or something and they defend by stepping close to your head to base out, and then, okay, perfect, now I'm going to go to X guard. So a lot of these things, like, jiu-jitsu is really not as complicated as it seems from like the outside, or like when you're like kind of like more of a beginner. Like, yeah, all these things are actually more like basic than it seems like. Like, you don't just go to X guard because you want to. You need to make it available, or when it becomes available, you go for it. And yeah, that's one of my favorite triggers, because I love X guard. I love when people step close to my head.
It was in your last video, was it not?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. And just in general, I might, if we come up with a lot of good triggers, I'll probably make a YouTube video all about triggers. So it's actually a good use of our time. And so you guys are helping me make a YouTube video. So I appreciate it. Yeah. Mike, what are some of your triggers you like to go for?
My favorite one is when I'm entering somebody's half guard and they leave their leg lazy on my hip. It's a trigger for me to immediately go for toe hold. And it's almost every time somebody does that. And even if they react right there, they're giving me the pass, because they'll yank their leg out right away and I can easily pass to the side. So I can either go for a toe hold or just drop in for a straight leg lock. But that's the main trigger that I use all the time. I see it. People are so lazy with their feet.
And if someone is trying to attack your foot, Joey, what is a good way to defend, to stop them from being able to do that in half guard, like to prevent the toe hold in the first place?
Like if I'm on the bottom?
Yeah, if you're on the bottom, you have
Yeah.
your outside leg. Yeah, like a knee shield. Your foot's hanging out there. You can see they're thinking about that toe hold. Like, what would you do?
So if I know, like, if I can see it before they've gone for the toe hold, I just keep my foot like connected to their body. The toe hold, like, you actually have to get my foot off your body and isolate your arms around it. So if I can keep it nice and tight to your body, not too worried. Like, you'll have a really hard time fishing it free. But like Mike said, like, a lot of people get lazy with it, and I do too. Like, we're all human. Like, sometimes you're playing a knee shield, your foot flaps out a little bit, and a guy grabs it. If I feel someone grab a toe hold, I'm kicking that leg straight to get it free from the grip every time. The problem with that is now my leg's not protecting me anymore. So by threatening that toe hold, if I want to free my leg, I'm probably giving him an opportunity to get like chest to chest or something like that.
Exactly. I use that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point. Exactly, keeping your foot close, not being lazy, right? Because sometimes people, they try to attack the toe hold anyways. I can see them, and feel them. They're like, they want the toe hold. They're trying to find my foot, but I'm just keeping it close to their body, and it's just not there. But they're trying anyways. Like, okay, you can try all you want, but like, I'm not just gonna be lazy with my foot. Like, I'm not gonna, like, unless I am lazy and they go for it, that's different. But like, when they're trying and I'm not being lazy, like, yeah, you just keep your foot close. And another good thing is using a butterfly half guard. Because then your foot's tucked in their thigh and they can't go for it. So I much prefer butterfly half guard than I do knee shield overall. So whenever I can, I'll put a butterfly hook in because it protects you from that toe hold, and it's like having a frame like a knee shield, but also having a grip in at your instep. So I think overall it's better than the knee shield.
I like butterfly hooks. Anytime I can play any guard and like hybridize it with a butterfly hook, I'm always looking to stick a butterfly hook in. I just think, like, especially as a smaller guy, the butterfly hook is super useful because it allows me to control the distance in ways that, like, a knee shield lets me push you back. Like, really, that's all a knee shield can do. Like, I can make space. I can't really do anything else with it. Like, if you have a knee shield and I said, now pull the guy close with your knee shield, like, you can't do that. Now elevate the guy with your knee shield. Like, that knee shield can't do that. All it can do is control distance away from you. So like, I always like you said, like butterfly half guard, if I can stick that in there, now not only can I use it to keep that same distance the knee shield could do, but now I have the threat of I can elevate you. I can pull you into me if I want to. I can start to scoop underneath you. All these extra little things that the knee shield on its own doesn't offer. I like to tell my students, like, a knee shield is a safe guard, but it's not a dynamic guard. Like, most of the things you do from knee shield, I mean, I know you have a pretty good knee shield game, but like, pretty much all the attacks that come from knee shield, the first step is like, I am removing my knee shield. Like, if you want to come up and go for like a dogfight, like, I have to take my knee shield out of the way. Like, to me, that's, it's useful, it's safe, but if the first step is always to like remove the knee shield, I'm like, there's probably a variation I can play that would give me a few more like offensive options.
Exactly, because the knee shield keeps them far away from you, but also keeps you far away from them. Which is why you need to take it out. And it's funny you say that because I was teaching the dogfight at my second gym, my new gym, on Wednesday, and some of them were beginners, and which is fine. But they were like going. I think I taught the dogfight. They're going for it, but they're keeping their knee shield in, and because they're beginners, they don't have that understanding. Which is fine. But it's just a good. It's just not everyone kind of realizes, that you do need to take your knee shield out because it's more defensive, and then you can transition to other things. Like, not always, like, there's like flower sweeps you can do with the knee shield in, but overall, you need to take it out first because to attack, you want to get close to them, and you can't if you're keeping yourself far away from them using your knee shield. And just like, this is kind of, I don't know, kind of a question for you guys. If okay, just say you're in headquarters and someone is trying to lift you forward, like say you're chest to chest, like you're a low posture headquarters. Someone's trying to lift you forward with their inside butterfly hook. So not their outside one, but their inside one, like the one that, it's on the inside. How do you stop them from lifting you forward?
I use my head to post tripod.
Possibly.
You could tripod, depending on what grips they have on your upper body. You can also like sit back. So like, for me, I do this a lot from butterfly too, because it's a similar style of hook, style of motion. If you're trying to elevate me, if I can bring my hips lower to the ground, it makes it a lot harder for you to like get that lift. But you can also like if the person's really trying to lift you from that inside, that's where I'd maybe start looking to like push the knee across and go into like a side smash style of move. For me, I always teach my students, like when you're passing guards, especially like headquarters, that knee position is like we were talking about. It's almost like a trigger for me. So I always say it's like a clock. If their knee, the inside knee, is pointed up to 12 o'clock, it's pretty strong. It's, it's upright. It's going to take a lot of effort for me to move it side to side. But if they let their knee position start to slide to like 10, 9 o'clock, it's really easy now for me to push it down to the mat. So like, if someone's trying to elevate me from a headquarters where I'm low chest on chest and that knee starts to turn at all, I'm just going to push it right down to the ground and stop their ability to lift me at all.
Yeah, exactly. And then to your point, Mike, so if you post your head on the mat, that means all your weight's going to be on your head, right? And then someone might be able to get underneath your legs.
Yeah.
Right? Because now your legs are light. So I think this, I don't know, because I've been thinking about this, because I might make like a YouTube video all about like what underhooks are used for. And what they're really used for from passing is to connect yourself to them, but also to stop them from going knee to elbow and curling themselves into a ball. So like if you can take a near side underhook, then they can't lift with their with that butterfly hook because they can't curl themselves in. They can't bring their knee closer. So I was just like, interesting. I want to know if you guys kind of knew the answer to that one, or if you did, Mike.
I apparently did not.
Yeah, it's probably not as clear when I just like vocalize it, but it'll make sense when I show you what I mean. Because I've been watching a lot of clips, like when I always do when I make YouTube videos, and then I'm just thinking like, how can I explain this, and how does this like translate to other things? And there was just a good example of like. Robert, a leg lock guy, he was trying to elevate me. I was taking the near side underhook, then he couldn't, but then I lost my near side underhook, and then he started lifting me forward. I had to bail out and get out of there. So I'm like, okay, I can probably explain this to people so they can use this. So yeah, I don't know, kind of off topic, but yeah. What are some other triggers you guys like to go for? I'll start with, I'll go for another one. One is like close guard when you're on the bottom and they lean back. And then that's the perfect time to go for a hip bump sweep. And if you try to go for a hip bump sweep and they're not leaning back, it's probably going to be hard to do. Like if they're driving their weight forward, then getting them backwards is very hard. So either they don't have grips on you that stop you from coming up, or they're just leaning back, which would be the same thing. They don't have grips to stop you from coming up. And it's like, okay, easy hip bump sweep, you're leaning back, which is like you want to be all the way forward or all the way back, but not like all the way back where your head is past your hips. Like you want to keep it in line at least. But if someone's head is like leaning back, it's like, okay, hip bump sweep. And hip bump sweeps in general aren't like super high percentage only because people just try to go for them. They just try to go for them because I want one. I learned that in class. So this should work. Why is it not working? Well, it's like you're not going for it at the right time,
It could also lead to a triangle if they go to post back, right?
Yeah.
Off a failed hip bump sweep.
Exactly, because now their arms separated from their body. Yeah. Perfect time to go for a triangle, which again is another trigger. If someone posts their hand on the mat, perfect time to go for a triangle.
I'm back. Ooh, back in the game now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got one right there. Yeah. And you can that's the thing too when it comes to the hip bump sweep. If you don't even care about the hip bump sweep itself, and you just want to get a reaction, you can not even block the arm. Like you can, and then they might post out, or you can just bump your hips anyways, and then they can post their hand on the mat to stop the sweep. But it's like, well, I never wanted the sweep in the first place. I wanted you to separate your arm from your body. Now I'm going triangle. So yeah, it's another great example of a trigger.
I do exactly that all the time. Obviously like the hip bump sweep is a sweep. Everyone should know it. It does work. But especially when you get up to like higher level guys, it's pretty rare that you're going to get hip bump swept or that you're going to hip bump sweep a good brown or black belt or even a good purple belt. It's really hard to hip bump sweep good people, but it is really good as a threat to make someone do something. And like you talked about earlier, like if I know you're going to be somewhere 2 seconds from now, like if I'm setting up my hip bump sweep and I'm like, okay, I know I'm not going to block this arm, so this guy is going to post that arm, I already am prepared to triangle or omoplata or whatever I want to do, Kimura, on that posting arm before it's even posted. Whereas the guy I'm doing it to now has to react. Oh, I've got a post. He posts. The arm is already being attacked before he goes, oh, now I'm being triangled. So you're almost like a step ahead of people. Like I like to tell my students in the gym, like, imagine if you were playing a game of chess, but I got to tell you what the guy's next move was going to be before you made your move. It would be almost impossible to lose. If I know what you're going to do before you do it, it's really hard to lose a match. So like things like these, like using the hip bump sweep to get a reaction that is pretty common, is pretty standard, and you know you're going to get most of the time. If you threaten a hip bump sweep, like a hand is probably going to post. Using it that way can be a really good tool.
Yeah, and that's also a good example of like just getting movement going, because sometimes people either they hunker down and they just try not to like get anything going, and then where they're not even trying to progress either, they're just trying to stop you, or just say it's like a tournament or a super fight or whatever, and just like there's not much time left. Like you need to create some movement, you need to get some reactions going so you can actually attack. Because if someone just hunkered in tight, getting them to separate, like they're not going to willingly separate their arms from their body. You need to give them a reason to do it. So you need to create movement. So not always do you need to even know what you're doing almost. Sometimes you just need to move them around and then find what you want to go for. So I think that's a bit of not misunderstood, but not well understood thing. It's like, I'm not always trying to do something specific. Sometimes I just try to move people around so I can find what I want, or find what's available rather than like, I really want this technique. How am I going to get it? Right? It's like, no, I'll move them somewhere and it's going to create some movement. They're going to have to post out somewhere, do something. They're going to have to separate their arm from their body or something like that. And then I can attack. So yeah, you can make jiu-jitsu a lot easier for yourself just by like understanding that, like, just move people around.
I've been learning that a lot lately, that you don't really need to know 10,000 different moves. You just need to know the core fundamentals and how to use them properly.
Yeah, and that's what I've been saying for a long time. Like, you don't need 1,000 different techniques. You need to know the fundamentals, which I don't want to rant, but like it can be annoying sometimes when people say my channel is like a beginner channel, because it's not. It's just jiu-jitsu fundamentals, which are important for all levels. Because yeah, I talked about this before. Sometimes I feel like I don't get respect from like certain like higher belts because they're like, oh, I gotta learn from like Danaher or Gordon or something or whatever it is. But it's like, no, like, how good are your fundamentals? How good are your understandings of the specific objectives that need to be prioritized? Like, probably not always great. And these are the things that are going to help you the most, rather than learning like the latest, I don't know, what's that leg lock that's like super popular, that reap where I don't know what it's called. It's like outside reap almost. I don't know, but like I can't even do it. Like I've tried. I still got to figure it out more. But I think people get really high on these like new techniques that people are really popularizing in competitive jiu-jitsu, which is great. Definitely, you can learn those things. But if your fundamentals aren't perfect and great, you're not working on your fundamentals, then what are you even doing?
You talking about the false reap?
False reap, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you got another one. Yeah. Nailed it.
Yeah, but what you said, like creating movement, that's something I actually do a lot when I compete. One of the things, like, and some of my students have asked me every now and then, like, when I compete in the first chunk of the match, you know, let's say I pulled guard or the other guy pulled guard, I'll just start grabbing random shit. Like, maybe if I'm playing guard, I'll try and underhook his leg, and then I'll grab a wrist, and then I'll take a collar tie. And I'm not really doing anything with any of it. But what I'm doing is trying to see, what is this guy going to overreact to? Like, what grip do I take that makes him like, oh, like if I grab his wrist, he like really jams his arm back and tries to pull it away. And then you kind of know in your head, okay, if I need to make movement, this guy doesn't like if I try and control his wrist. He's going to overreact. Or like if I'm playing guard and I underhook his leg and he does nothing, like he doesn't move at all, I go, well, maybe this is a good guy to play K-guard on, because he's not reacting to the threat of like the underhook on the leg at all. He's not trying to free it, trying to strip it. So sometimes like just doing things, not necessarily committing to a move, but just seeing like, what's this guy going to react to and what's he not going to react to is super important, because overreactions can give you opportunities to do things, but so can underreactions. Like if you threaten, like you said, like maybe I get an underhook or something and the guy does nothing to deal with it. Well, if you're not going to react at all, I'm just going to continue down this path and see how far I can go with it. Maybe I can get up to a dogfight position, or I can sweep you with it, or things like that. So I'm always trying to look for overreactions and underreactions.
Yeah, that's a great point about underreactions too, because sometimes like you do something and it's like, oh, well, that was kind of easier than I thought it was going to be. Now can I actually attack that, right? And because they didn't overreact, it's like you actually get what you didn't even intend as like, it's almost like your setup actually works. And what I do for movement, I always try to pull people forward or lift people forward. And the higher belts at our gym realize that, especially because Darren tells them not to come forward on me. So it's really annoying because now they sit back so much. And I just want to pull them forward, because as soon as I can pull them forward, I can figure out what I'm going to do from there. And again, I don't have it in my head beforehand what I'm going to do. I just need to pull them forward, get their weight off their legs, right? Because all the way back is your butt is to your heels, and then forward your butt lifts up, and you want to attack before they can get their head on the mat or you, because when they're all the way forward, well, now they have base going forward, so you can't really lift them any more forward unless you can get underneath their legs, which isn't all the way forward, but if they're all the way forward, it can be hard to get underneath their legs too. But yeah, like I just want to move people forward all the time. And when people sit back, it slows down the roll, because they need to come forward to also attack, right? To pass and whatnot. So it can slow down the roll. And then people are scared to progress because they think a trap is coming, because a trap is coming. But yeah, it's like almost like anti-jiu-jitsu, but you got to do, I guess.
I think that's why a lot of people say black belt matches can be kind of boring, is because when you get two people who have the same approach, like you just mentioned, like, if I'm worried about something and I'm not going to make a move, or I'm going to like almost like sit back because I know you're trying to elevate me, it can lead to less action.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because that's exactly why black belt matches are often boring, because they don't want to overextend themselves, and neither one does. And nothing happens. Neither one creates any movement, and then the viewers suffer because it ends up being boring. That's why I don't really like watching jiu-jitsu.
That's why I like watching the first 5 minutes of an ADCC match, because they don't give a shit about points. They just go all out.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And then what can happen too is people can be, because this can be boring for me too to watch, where people are getting things going, but they can't quite finish like the end of it. And like the person just reguards by the end, and then they try again, and then they reguarded, and just like they can't quite establish position at the end. And so it can kind of go either way, where it's like not scrambly, but just nothing ends up happening. It's almost like the person on the bottom, I guess, would like hunker down, and instead of using that movement to attack, they use it to just defend, and then the person on top, they did all that work. Now they're back in the guard. So it's not always a spectator-friendly sport. Yeah, someone on Reddit said one thing might make it more interesting is if we did it like we did back in the day, like with the Romans in the Olympics, and grappling was done all nude. And I don't know what you guys think about that. I think that would be really uncomfortable. Like, honestly, I don't know. I feel like without underwear, things would just be kind of flapping everywhere, and it would kind of get in the way and make it awkward, obviously. But beyond the awkwardness, just like it itself would, I don't know, it would make things difficult, I think.
I think it would make things very difficult.
But what do you think, Joe? Do you think we should go back to like the old days without clothes?
No, I'm going to keep my clothes on. That's my personal preference. Every now and then at my gym, though, we'll do rounds without shirts, like without rash guards for no-gi, especially when we're getting ready for like ADCC opens and stuff like that. And even just not having the shirt on, I feel like naked when I roll. It's a lot of like skin-on-skin contact. It's really uncomfortable. I don't know how people enjoy it.
I'm down for that. I'd like to try that.
I like it.
It's hard to hold on to people, man. When you're both like 6 or 7 rounds into the night, and you're like, all right, we're 7 rounds in. Let's get one last round. ADCC rules. We're just going to take the rash guards off and go bare chest. And like, man, it is hard to hold on to people.
I think that's why people don't wear shirts in ADCC, because they're so hard to hold on to. And a couple of years ago, when we were rolling more at my house, because we weren't allowed to roll at the gym, because, pandemic and everything. Not that we were doing that, because we wouldn't break the rules and the law, but like in the summer it was so hot, so we would take our rash guards off and it was just like a slip and slide, like nothing's going. But I like that though, and I think I like thrive in the sweat. I don't know, like, not that it's like, it's still hard, but I think I do a good job still when it's like slippery, where I think some other people have a harder time. Like I don't know, I just thrive in that sweat. So maybe I would do better even without clothes, without shorts on or without underwear. But like I said, just like, it's just because the anatomy of men, I think it would make it really, I don't know, just kind of, you know what I mean? It would just be kind of in the way.
Oil checks would be
yeah, but think about like how uncomfortable you can make someone. Like you've got a Kimura on someone, you're on top, you're sitting on their face, right? You could get the tap right then and there.
Yeah.
Because especially if you didn't shower, especially if you didn't shower, which could make things interesting too. Because not always is it about physical toughness, but it's mental toughness too. Yeah. So if someone's butthole is right in your face, you need to be mentally tough.
You have to be pretty mentally strong to handle that.
If it stinks.
Yeah.
Well, either way.
Even if it doesn't.
I don't know where I stole this rule from, but at our gym we have a minimum of 4 layers rule. So there must be at all times a minimum of 4 layers of clothing between our genitals. So both underwear, both shorts. Like there's no like, oh, I'm just gonna wear spats, no underwear, no shorts. That's 1 layer, man. We each have to have 2 layers. There's always 4 layers between the genitals. It keeps everyone
How do you
nice
know?
and happy.
Do you check?
No, but you'll notice. You'll notice.
Yeah, it's true.
You won't know if they have more, but if you have less, you're definitely going to notice.
But that's 2 layers, right? So you're talking rash guard and something else too?
No, so it's like if I've got my underwear and my shorts on, that's 2 layers for me, and the other person has underwear and shorts on. That's so like we have to have a combined 4 layers between at all times.
Okay, so you can wear your underwear and shorts, and I could wear 2 rash guards.
But that's not on your, like, they got to be, if you wear 2 rash guards as pants, you can wear 2 sets of spats. I would allow that. It'd be weird, but I would allow it.
That would be weird. But why did they do that back in the day, do you think? And why, did the statues, they were all so small? Maybe
stage fright. I don't know.
Well, maybe people evolved to have bigger ones, and then when they were so small, they weren't quite in the way. So it wasn't quite a big deal when they were grappling because they're just like a little inconvenience instead of like a bigger inconvenience.
I wonder back then because there was no rules, pancrase, right? Like, could you grab somebody by the balls and twist back then? Like you've all seen that video where the guy's screaming, "Twist his dick." Could that happen back then? Is that shit legal?
Well, it opens up more submissions for sure.
Oh, for sure. Somebody does that to me, I don't know what I'm doing.
But another trigger I like is when people are squared when they're standing, like their both feet are, I don't know what the word is, like they're both equally close to you rather than staggered. A great time to go for a dummy sweep, and it doesn't make you. It's the reason why it's called a dummy sweep is because you have to be a dummy to get swept like that, but that's not true. Like sometimes you just do what you shouldn't, and not all the time is it even bad to step squared, because if you use your knees to point forward, use your shins to press into them, then they can't extend you. And one thing I've been trying to do is, I learned this from Marcelo Garcia. I watched a video like 2 weeks ago. I didn't even know this was a thing. Like I learned something new, and what he would do, he would pull guard into the dummy sweep. He pull guard and dummy sweep them right away, and I was thinking, whoa, this is like a great takedown, I guess, that I've never explored. I guess it'd be, I don't know, I guess it'd be a sweep, but to me it's more like a takedown, because it's like a fake arpal ankle pick, but instead you're pulling guard and dummy sweeping right away, but you need them to step squared. So I was trying it and it wasn't working, and so I asked Darren, and he's like, well, you need to pull them forward first, like, pull their head forward, make them step. I was like, oh, that's such an obvious answer. I didn't realize, because I was just trying to go for it anyways. And then now I'm trying to pull people forward, get them to step squared, and then instantly pulling guard and then going for that dummy sweep. And I should have realized that when I watched Marcelo. But yeah, I think that's a cool one that I'm trying to add to my game.
I do it all the time too. I watched Marcelo do it to Crone a bunch in their matches, and he didn't even touch him with his hands. his feet are just like hands. So the way he angled his feet and pulled them back so quickly, it would knock Crone off balance every time, and sometimes sweep him completely. And I use that all the time, and it works at least 50% of the time. If not, it off balances them and creates some kind of scramble.
And sometimes people do wrestle really squared. So people that wrestle really squared, that's a really good one to use on them. But most people definitely wrestle staggered, so then you have to get them to steps. So probably Crone, he probably was wrestling very squared, and that's why it was so like available for him every time. But Marcelo, he like changed jiu-jitsu. Like,
oh, completely.
He doesn't get the respect he deserves. Like, he's definitely well respected, but it's like the newer generation doesn't understand that a lot of what Marcelo or a lot of what Danaher teaches is stuff that Marcelo did when he was competing. Like, so much of modern jiu-jitsu comes from Marcelo, and I feel like he deserves more credit. Like, Gordon's known as the GOAT of no-gi, Hodger's the GOAT of gi, but Marcelo might be the all-around GOAT.
I think so.
Because he was smaller too and beat huge dudes and whatnot, and just completely revolutionized the game. And no disrespect to Hodger, I don't mean this at all disrespectful, but he used a lot of fundamentals to get his wins, which a lot of the techniques were kind of tried and true, which is nothing wrong with that. That's great. But Marcelo was, I feel like, kind of more of an innovator, where he came up with his own stuff and it worked great. And now it's a lot of what modern jiu-jitsu is, like the straitjacket system,
X-guard.
Yeah, X-guard, that shoulder crunch sweep. It's Marcelotine. Yeah, and I feel like my game, I watched a lot of Marcelo back in the day, but so it was definitely influenced by that. But I think just like progressively, it's just gotten more and more like Marcelo's, and I just really, I've always really liked Marcelo because he's a really nice dude too. We have a very similar body type in the sense of we have like short, strong legs, and we're really good with our feet. So I should watch him even more because I learned that from him. So I'm sure I could learn even more.
I think for scrambles, sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think for scrambles, one of my favorite guys to watch is Gary Tonin. There's nothing it's never a boring match with him. He's always creating some kind of scramble or doing something crazy. Same with Jeff Glover. I know I haven't seen him roll in a long time, but when we did watch him roll, they were at least entertaining to watch. There was never a dull moment with those two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Marcelo is one of those guys that people who started training like around the same time as us, we kind of like started coming up when Marcelo was at his peak, when he was winning, when he was like, super dominant and winning all these titles. And for us, I think like getting to watch that, we have like a level of respect for him. But I do feel like the new people coming into the sport don't really know as much about Marcelo. Like, I'll have white belts ask me like, hey, who should I watch for like, this kind of stuff? And I'll be like, Marcelo. Like, without a doubt, Marcelo's the guy to watch if you want to learn about this. And I'll be like, who's that? I don't know. And I'm like, I just feel like he's one of those guys that doesn't necessarily have like you said, like that lasting like respect from like the new generations. Like, everyone kind of knows of Hodger, and like Gordon is what Gordon is now, but I feel like technically Marcelo was as good or better than both of those guys. Like you said, like they had a lot of size on him. When people are like, oh, Gordon keeps winning absolute divisions. Well, no shit. When you're big and technical, it's a lot easier to win than when you're small and technical.
Yeah, and like I've said before on the podcast, it'd be easier to call Gordon the GOAT if he wasn't on steroids, because then we really know, can he beat these big dudes natural? Because Marcelo could. He couldn't beat everyone that was bigger than him. Like, size does matter, but he did beat a lot of big dudes, and he was just so dominant and so good. And yeah, like, would his record be better than Gordon's if Gordon was natural, right? So I don't know who's more technical. Like, to me, I don't know. I got to go with Marcelo. I think
like Marcelo is winning in the gi and no gi. So to say someone's like the GOAT, like when people say Gordon Ryan's the GOAT, like you have to say he's the GOAT of no gi, because a lot of these guys, like one thing I'll give Hodger over Gordon is that Hodger won them both. Like, he's not just training 365 days a year in no gi. He's doing both. Like, to train at least half of the year in the gi and then go win ADCC. Like that's impressive in a different way. Like, I'm not taking anything away from these guys who train just no-gi, but there is something to be said for the guys who are winning the same amount of titles in no-gi, but also winning titles in the gi. Like, you're basically winning in two different sports at the same time, whereas one person's just doing a single sport.
Exactly. And again, to my earlier point, Hodger, definitely amazing, no disrespect. He used fundamentals to be super successful, which is amazing. And then Gordon uses so much of what Marcelo innovated and created, but then Marcelo's the one that, again, innovated and created that. So it's hard not to give Marcelo more credit, and the credit that he deserves so much. They all deserve a lot of credit. They're all amazing for sure.
It's funny though, I've heard that Marcelo doesn't like to use or teach, he calls them strongman moves like kimuras and arm triangles and a lot of leg locks and stuff like that.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. Like,
especially in this day and age, you know what I mean, with the leg lock game.
Yeah, or like kimuras, I can see a case for the submission itself being a strongman move, but the kimura grip is an amazing grip, like the kimura trap and whatnot. To not use that, or to think that, to not give that credit for, because that system deserves a lot of credit. It's great. So I don't think that's accurate of what he thinks. I think he also doesn't do arming guillotines. I could be wrong, or is he? Or maybe it's the opposite. He does. I don't know. I think he doesn't do arming guillotines.
I'm not sure about the guillotines.
But to me, arming guillotines are the best. Like, but yeah, body type matters, stuff like that. So maybe he has some bias because maybe his body type didn't work the best for those specific moves. And it wasn't necessarily that they're strongman moves or whatever, but they just didn't feel natural to him, or he didn't explore them enough to give them enough credit. But people can be, great and amazing, but be wrong about some things. So yeah.
He did win by heel hook against, I can't remember the guy's name. Yeah. The guy was enormous and dumped him on his, he was on him as a backpack, dumped Marcelo right on his back. And then, but when he got better, he jumped up and grabbed a heel hook and won. But that's the only time you'll ever see him do a heel hook in competition. And I've heard that he does not like to teach it at all.
Well, one thing I've heard too, which I don't mean any disrespect, this is what I've heard, is that he's not a great teacher, which I find interesting, because people say that Paul Schreiner, I think that's his name, he's a student under Marcelo. They say that he's a much better teacher than Marcelo. But he uses what he learns from Marcelo, but does a better job teaching it. And overall, Marcelo isn't a great teacher. But I don't know, like,
in which way? Like,
just I don't know. I guess just not great at explaining things. Yeah, just not great at explaining things, I guess, and not making it clear enough to the students. But
there is a really big difference between like being good at jiu-jitsu and being good at teaching jiu-jitsu. Like, I'm sure most people who've trained long enough have met someone who's like, man, this guy is really good. Like, maybe he beats me up on the mats. And then you ask him to show you a move, and he's just like, I don't know, bro, just like move like that. And you're like, okay, well, that was the most useless advice any human has ever given me. But thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, like we all know someone like that who, like, they can do things really well, but they cannot articulate how or why they're doing or what they're doing. They're just like, yeah, my body just moves really well, and I'm real good at it. And you're like, well, okay, great job. I don't know if you'll ever be a coach, but like, you're good at the sport. So I think, like, you hear a lot about people going like, oh yeah, I trained with I train under this world champion. And to me, that always, like, you got to take that with a grain of salt. Like, just because the guy you're training with is really good and athletic doesn't necessarily mean that he's the best coach.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's interesting because Marcelo did have a lot of really good students. Dylan Dennis was one of them.
Yeah.
And, say what you want about him, but he's definitely good at jiu-jitsu.
For sure. World champ.
Yeah, I think he came up originally from Marcelo. I could be wrong, but I think he started with Marcelo,
yeah.
But I could definitely be wrong. But there's also like Mateus Diniz. There's Tinoco.
Gianni Grippo started there.
No, actually, Gianni Grippo, he started at Renzo Gracie's, and then he switched to Marcelo's.
He moved to Marcelo's as a brown belt or whatever. But I think that's a good example of, like, if you put enough talented people in a room, they're probably going to get good. Like, whether it's the great instruction or what, but, like, I can't imagine if you put some talented, intelligent people in a room where they're rolling with all of those guys and Marcelo, that they're not going to learn how to do jiu-jitsu, whether it's from the instruction or just from rolling with other really skilled training partners and picking their brain, you know, seeing what they do, trying to mimic that. Like, talent breeds talent.
Exactly. And also Bernardo, he was also with Marcelo.
I was just going to mention that, yeah.
Yeah, but all those guys, I'm pretty sure, didn't start with Marcelo, other than Danis might have. I'm not exactly sure.
I think Danis did, yeah.
Yeah, but again, great, which, yeah, is really shows Joey's point of, like, if you have all these people that are really good at jiu-jitsu, even if you're not a great teacher, just like good people rolling together, you're gonna get good. And if you're a really good competitor, probably good people are gonna want to train with you. So making people good isn't only teaching them; it's like rolling with them and giving them the right looks by being good at jiu-jitsu. So even despite him maybe not being a great teacher, I don't know. I've never learned from him. He was still he still produced great talent because he was so good and everyone that came was so good and they all made each other so much better. But again, one quick thing, no disrespect to Marcel. I don't know if he's a bad teacher. This is just what I've seen people say, that he's not a great teacher. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think to keep going further on that point, you know, obviously John Danaher is a great coach. I'm not going to say differently, but if you look at the people in that room, I think that gym would have had success no matter who's running it. Like, that's, I guess, my unpopular opinion is that, like, if you put Gordon Ryan, Gary Tonin, all the guys who left to start B Team, Marigali, all those guys in a room, and you gave them you or I as a coach, bro, they're still all going to be fantastic grapplers. Like, the coach at that point, to me, plays a somewhat minimal role. It's mostly the training partners that are really important there.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes people give coaches too much credit, which is not a bad thing. It's fine. Like, I think respecting your coach obviously is great, but also understanding that a lot of times it is the room more so that has the biggest impact on your jiu-jitsu, more so than having a great coach. And there's tons of great rooms out there where you've never even heard of the coach, and it might be them that's producing the talent, or it might just be the fact that they attracted a lot of great people, and iron sharpens iron 100%. And yeah, another good example is just the fact that I haven't had a coach since I was a blue belt, but I still did good. I got to roll with good people, and that's made me better. So yeah, I think people shouldn't rely too much on their coach or blame their coach either, because that's the thing too. If you're not doing well enough and you're like blaming your coaching, it's probably not their fault. It's probably like you got to take accountability for yourself and get better. Or maybe it's the room isn't good enough. Maybe they are a great coach, but the room kind of sucks, and you're not going to get much better because of that.
You know, it seems like a really great coach. I've been watching a lot of his videos lately. He was the gentleman that came up and did the wrestling video with you.
Oh, Joe Breza.
And the way he explains things, like he's not showing moves. It's all like him talking. They're amazing to watch. He was basically showing that Danaher's feet to floor video is basically American wrestling, just with Japanese names. That's like most 90% of his stuff. The way he was breaking it down, he's a very, very good coach.
Yeah, Joe is super knowledgeable. He's super knowledgeable. I learned so much from him, like when he was down for the week, and we talk all the time too. And he likes to criticize Danaher. Danaher's wrestling. Right?
Yeah, because the videos I was watching.
Yeah, because Joe is a wrestler, former D1 wrestler, so he knows what he's talking about. And just like small things of like, you know, that Danaher does of like hand fighting, or just like taking 50-50 grips. They're just things that you wouldn't be teaching in high level wrestling. So
is that 50-50 grips, that one?
Yeah.
I was watching that video too. He said it makes zero sense whatsoever why you'd do that.
Yeah, exactly. So he can really see that and be like, you know, what is he doing? Like, what is he teaching? Or like, you know, us jiu-jitsu guys, or just jiu-jitsu guys in general, I wouldn't say us, because I definitely view, when I watch Danaher, like, I don't just take what he says as like word. I'm sure you guys don't either, but a lot of people do, where it's like whatever he says, they like bow down to it, right? But everyone should be scrutinized and put under the lens to make sure that what they're teaching is correct and best, right? Because if what some of that stuff Joe's saying is wrong and not taught in high level wrestling, then it is, right? Then it's just, he knows what he's talking about. So
I agree and disagree in a way. So one thing, like our gym, we've got a wrestling coach now, really good wrestler, and he's like a teacher by day, like he teaches for a living, so like he's a very good instructor. But one of the things we've had the most fun kind of exploring together is like he has a bunch of knowledge from wrestling that I don't have, but what I do have is the jiu-jitsu knowledge. So there are certain things that we'll do, and he'll be like, yeah, in wrestling this isn't like a good thing to do, or like in wrestling this is a really good like position or grip to have, and I'm like, but in jiu-jitsu it leaves you really open to something that is illegal in wrestling, like that wouldn't happen. So I do think there are things that, like, if you took the best wrestling minds in the world and showed them jiu-jitsu guys wrestling in a jiu-jitsu rule set, they might say is really bad wrestling. But part of that is because it has to be tailored for the rules. Like certain things that you would never do in wrestling you can get away with doing in jiu-jitsu because the rules are literally different. Like, it does make a big difference when you change things. Like, it's not quite the same sport, so you're trying to almost like hybridize two sports and two rule sets. There's a lot obviously that does carry over. Like, I'm sure Joe knows what he's talking about when it comes to wrestling and does understand like at least the basics of how to adapt things for jiu-jitsu. But like there are certain grips that are illegal in wrestling. Like, so in wrestling I can't do like a Muay Thai clinch, like 2 hands on the back of the head. Well, in jiu-jitsu I can. I can grab you both hands on the back of the head. There's literally nothing that stops me from doing that. Like if someone is in turtle in wrestling, certain rules, you're not allowed to lock your hands together. Well, in jiu-jitsu, I can lock that for sure. I also don't need to turn you in wrestling. I'm looking to turn, get you on your back. In jiu-jitsu, like if you're going to be belly down, I'm A-okay with that. So, I see a lot of videos of like wrestlers, and I'm not saying Joe specifically, but wrestlers like criticizing like a jiu-jitsu guy's technique in wrestling, which again, I agree a lot of it's really terrible, but there are certain times they criticize and you go like, yeah, maybe that wouldn't work in NCAA wrestling, but for the purposes of what I'm trying to accomplish in jiu-jitsu, it's really good. Like, that is a good move to do. It puts me in a good grappling scenario.
He talks about that a lot too, that it has to be tailored towards jiu-jitsu as well. You can't just use flat wrestling moves. Sometimes they don't work, yeah. He has a belt in jiu-jitsu as well, right?
Yeah, he's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Yeah, okay. But I agree with you, Joey. I think that both perspectives need to be scrutinized always and make sure they're accurate, where like, the jiu-jitsu guy teaching wrestling, you need to make sure what he's teaching is true, and the wrestler teaching wrestling for jiu-jitsu needs to be scrutinized to make sure that this stuff makes sense within a jiu-jitsu context and it's not just wrestling for wrestling. So 100%. I think Joe does a great job of seeing the jiu-jitsu perspective. So yeah, but I think many wrestlers don't. I think you're 100% right. And no one should be unscrutinized. No one should be like, bowed down to because of their name, like their big name or they accomplish this or that. It's like always what they're doing, what they're showing, and make sure it's 100% accurate and true. So yeah, I think it goes both ways, 100%. Yeah. But yeah, it's been an hour and it's been a good time. So with that said, thank you for sticking around to the end of the podcast. Oh, actually, first off, it would be helpful for us, like if you guys have any questions, like leave them in the YouTube comments, because sometimes we do have a hard time figuring out what to talk about. We talked about so many things, so we always appreciate if you have questions. We can answer them and talk about them. So yeah, with that said, thank you for sticking around to the end of the video or end of the podcast. If you're still here, please leave a comment or a question, and we'll see you guys next time.